So next time we'll get you back.
Good evening. You have me because, technically speaking, we don't have a chairman just at the moment. It's the first meeting of the Standards Committee in this full year. So, just for the purposes of getting through the start of it, can I just let you know what the fire evacuation procedures are? We're not expecting a fire alarm tonight, so the alarm goes off, it is the real thing. Please can you follow the pre-indicated signs to get out of the building. Do not use the lifts, but use the stairs. If you can't get downstairs, let me know and we'll secure you downstairs. Once you leave the building, will you meet on the views and don't come out the building until I say it's okay to come back into the building. The other part, just to let people know, is the meeting is being filmed. There's a camera over there. It's being live streamed out. As you're here, it's a public meeting, hence we all technically agree to it being filmed. But the first item on the agenda, before I can hand over to somebody, is the election of a chair. So can I have a volunteer to be election for the chair? Last year, chairman was Alistair Clark. And no, give me anybody.
Okay.
Give me anybody.
Sorry.
So can I have a volunteer to be chairman, please?
I'm the person Alistair.
Do we have any other volunteers? I don't think we need a vote on that one because there's only one volunteer. Alistair Clark, would you like to take over as chair?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your confidence. Right. Before I go any further, we've had a request for a petition to move the petitions item further up the agenda. And the proposal is that it should be taken just before item 6. Are you happy that that should happen? Or shall we make council for this next meeting?
It's a splendid idea. It was a splendid idea until you mentioned the holiday bit.
So I think that's really acceptance.
Use the microphone. Just need one of the buttons there.
Right, is that better?
Yeah, thank you. It's
Excellent.
more for the camera as well.
Right. Okay, so we've now got
Vice Chairman.
minutes. Sorry? Oh, election of a vice chairman. Again, do we have a volunteer? Last year, Councillor Tony Clark ably helped me.
I'm happy to do that again.
Are we all happy with that?
Yes.
Right, you are duly elected. Thank you very much indeed.
How about you, Clark?
Yeah.
Right. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. You have a copy in your agenda pack. Are you happy that they are a true record of that meeting?
Yeah.
Proposed? Seconded by Peter Kern. Any objections? No. Okay. I shall sign those minutes for the 6th of March, wasn't it? Item 3, do we have any apologies?
All set.
We are full set. The only person who could be here, as proposed from business, Howard Lindsley, the other independent person, IP, yes. Great. I have him.
So, what the role is
Well, yes, I've never met Peter, so until tonight.
Lucky you.
Would you like to say, Peter is independent person, or one of our independent persons. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, yeah, what do I press? This one here?
Yes, I'm one of Hart's two independent persons. I'm also independent person for Hampshire County Council, and until last month I'd been on the Basingstoke and Dean Standards Committee, and I was chairman for the last 4 years, so I think I know my way around it. I'm obviously retired senior civil servant in the Cabinet Office, so I have a background in central government rather than local government, but having spent 10 years on Basingstoke, I think I've caught up a little bit, basically. So, and I'm here tonight to, I think, just act as sort of checks and balances on Darryl, if he gets out of his pram. I shall have to intervene, but I hope that won't be necessary. Anyway, it's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have an interest in any item on the agenda? No? None?
Terry?
Paper B, Appendix 1, I am named. I think I should re-declare that.
Right, yes, indeed. Okay, we will note that, thank you. Right. So we will now deal with item 9, if we may, please. Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for moving it earlier. I'm sure those at Orphan Parish will be delighted. Mr. Phillips asked me to give the background on this, so I'd like to do that for members of the committee. It involves a suggested change to the petition scheme that we've got at Paper D, which is part of our constitution. Sorry, you all right with that, John?
Sorry, trying not to sneeze because we're wrong.
Fair enough. Our petitions protocol is slightly unusual when compared to many other councils, and a significant number of residents have been lobbying, and lobbying me particularly, to move that there's an update to effectively bring it in line with what's now deemed standard practice and what has been pretty much adopted by central government and by many councils, including Hampshire, Basingstoke, Rushmore, a whole list of councils. Our current petition scheme requires effectively a paper petition that has to be signed by every single person physically and requires their full address. Most authorities are quite happy to accept e-petitions, electronic petitions, which can be signed electronically, and there are two preferred medium that are used for that. Sorry, I've forgotten the website's name, just bear with me. Change.org or 38 Degrees. Many councils, in fact, decide to implement their own, which is an option for us. So we could have our own online e-petition scheme, which people can sign up to directly on our own website. And I understand Mr. Phillips has been looking at that. He can fill us in. But by doing that, it would enable, without changing the prerequisites of having the numbers of people that are mentioned in the current policy, and without any other changes, it's just a physical change to the way that people can circulate a petition and sign it. A concern could be that false duplicate information could easily be submitted online through false email IDs, but that's no different to people signing a bit of paper with false information, putting Mickey Mouse. Importantly though, because the e-petition scheme can require their full name and their postcode, that can be checked, should that be required, for accuracy and validated against the electoral register or in the median. So I don't think there's really any change in leaving it open to abuse by having an e-petition scheme. So the change that I'm requesting on behalf of residents is that the current guidelines policy is updated in line with the government petitions in terms of signature, address and petitioner details. I think that pretty much covers it.
Yes, Dan.
To help Councillor Forster, it's page 4 petition scheme at the end, right at the top. Can I suggest, is that last bullet point, the first bullet point, right at the top of the page? I would suggest that what you're saying, Councillor Forster, is that the name, postcode, address of any person supporting the petition is what you're looking for, rather than the wording that's there.
It is. My suggestion in addition to that, there would be an extra line or a process that basically specifies what medium will accept it on. So whether it's on our own website or using change.org or something like that, one of the recognised ones that has a process to effectively get people to subscribe properly.
Chairman, just to pick that up, just to get this correct in my mind, that could be done on our web page rather than the petition scheme to make clear where it comes in, until such time as perhaps the council itself brings out its own formal process where it can record stuff through. But in the absence of the council system, then the e-petitions could be, for example, change.org or 36 degrees.
That sounds eminently sensible. Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of sort of points or questions. The first thing being that if you look on page 2 of the petition scheme, item number 1, it says, what is a petition? And at the moment it says it's a formal written request. If we were to add the word electronic via the Hart website into there, it would clarify the point quite easily, I think. But I do think it does need something that makes sure that it is a petition that is organised through Hart, as it were, or has some formal link. Because you can run petitions on Facebook and other popular media sites. So it's worth looking at that. Does anybody happen to know if change.org track your IP address? It's just from my experience of using SurveyMonkey for doing my neighbourhood plan work, you get the IP address of people, and if there is any concern that people have been submitting multiple entries, you can scan for repeated IP addresses, and that was something we actually did as part of our data processing at the time. But in my mind, and possibly I might regret this in a few years' time, at the end of the day, if we have a small number of duplicate submissions because somebody is so desperate to get a point discussed by the district council, I'm not convinced that really changes matters too much. The point is to get above a particular number so that an issue is raised to the district council for discussion, and it's not an independent vote, is it, on a particular point. So to my mind, even if there is a small risk of errors there, it's not significant. I have a couple of other points on drafting which I can share with you perhaps separately.
Thank you. I think Councillor Vaughan's suggestion that if we do this using a system that actually tracks IP addresses is sensible. We wouldn't necessarily want to look at them all the time, but in the event we decided to investigate. The other thing, from when I have used these systems, the ones I've used, tend to send an email to the email address you've given to allow you to, before it accepts the vote, and asks you to validate it. I know it's a very limited form of validation. Anybody can put in loads of email addresses, but at least there's something. And just the other point, which maybe Mr Phillips can clarify, Councillor Forster mentioned that if we did have concerns, we could validate the names and addresses against the electoral register. My understanding was we wouldn't be allowed to use the electoral register for that purpose.
That's correct. Strictly speaking, you only use the electoral register for the purposes of the electoral register. It doesn't cover everybody, so you can't verify it against council tax or anything like that. I think it may be open to abuse in some sort of sense, but is it really going to have a material effect against the whole thing? Providing that we keep within regard to GDPR principle behind tracking people who make comments and destroy that after, as soon as it's not needed anymore, then that will be a safeguard. That's probably the safest one in the lot. We could put in lots of safeguarding measures, which effectively mean we spend most of our time double checking what levels. I think if you're going to have electoral petitions, very personal point of view, from an officer point of view, and to resourcing, I think you have to give a little bit of latitude. It may not be completely perfect, but why not be imperfect?
Thank you, Chairman. It was interesting. I was looking earlier at some of the, I just Googled e-petitions at councils. A very interesting paper that had gone to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Medway Council, who introduced e-petitions some time ago. And the debate really was around the platform that the council would accept. The paper states that the most regular platform that councils are using is one that's provided by mod.gov.
Modern.gov.
Oh, it's obvious.
Which, just to help you out, is what we're looking to do.
Okay, so the interesting thing with that is that site requires the same level of information plus email that a paper petition would include. So it's more than just postcode, it's the physical address and all of the information. And it's quite a long paper. It gets into quite a lot of the details to the benefits or the detrimental impact of using a third-party site. And they were open to look at third-party sites, but felt that was the one that most local authorities had decided gave that level of security and that level of compliance with the existing paper petitions. So I'm no expert, but I'll just throw that into the pot. So it's not about principle, it's about if we were to change the policy, making sure that we've got the right platform and we're learning from other authorities.
Just to come back on those, change.org does track IP address. 38 Degrees also tracks it. 38 Degrees, when the petition is submitted, although they gather that information that Councillor Bailey requested, as do ModGov based councils, they track that information when you first register. But in terms of the petition submission, it's often stripped out, so the petition submission has the name, the postcode, and pretty much nothing else. So the filtering is done by the organisation. ModGov works that way.
Councillor Forster's correct, you've got to register, which I think is the key part, is the registration right from the word go. And once you're registered, then it can allow you to, so to register you must give the full details of where you are plus the postcode. After that, you don't need to know where they live, you just need the postcode comes out. It drops back one level, that's all. So it's the registration that's the key, check and balance, not the submission bit.
But sorry, is it checked or balanced by anyone in particular?
It's up to local authority if it wants to check and balance it and go back. You can find the registration numbers. Using ModGov, the local authority is in control and it integrates with all our other systems. That's the advantage of ModGov. It's one system. You can go to committee systems and you can feed the websites much easier than using third parties. But until we get ModGov in, I think what Councillor Forster says, can we get the third parties in with funding as well? Until such time as we formalise our own, because we have not made the decision to go down the ModGov route. That's under review at the moment and maybe an approach that follows. But I think he's trying to open up the petitions now rather than wait.
That's correct.
Just a few minor drafting points, but they're worth raising now. On page 2, item 3, there's a reference to 5 clear days in a footnote. The footnote refers to clear working days, it needs to be one or the other. And it also says that petition will be considered at an appropriate meeting 5 clear days, not no less than and no more than just exactly 5 clear days, which is going to be very easy to fail. On page 3, about the 5th or 6th bullet point down item 5, it's very clear in this document what is meant by council and councillors and members and so on, but when it refers to employees about their terms and conditions of employment, I assume it refers to the district council's employees, not employees generally. I don't know.
So it's just a point worth clarifying that that's direct council employees and not third-party service providers to Hart.
They would be employees.
I suppose not, no.
There's no reference to GDPR. Darren did raise GDPR. I don't know whether the council needs to, in its notices to people who might want to raise a petition, the GDPR consequences of doing so, if any. And I haven't thought through whether there are any, but somebody ought to.
It's on the website actually. The GDPR part, so we
In general,
petitions.
okay.
Yeah. And it's actually on the petitions page as well.
Right,
That's fine, it's all right. It's on there, but
last
probably
but
wise to put it in the document as well.
Last but not least, wherever it says less than 500, less than 1,000, it should be fewer. That's it.
Yes, just a couple more of the drafting points. The penultimate and the last bullets of section 5 on page 3. I just think they need a couple of words in front of them. They've lost the logical thread of the previous points, and I wonder whether they should say will not consider in front of them. That's all.
Yeah. You mean the following matters are therefore excluded from the scope of the petition scheme, or you missed that one? Which one?
The penultimate and the last bullets, activities and aims of a political party or organisation, is the meaning that we will not consider the activities and aims. What was?
Yeah.
And I've got one possible typo. At the top of page 3, line 3, the words of it. And then it says Cabinet Portfolio Member and of it relates to local issues.
And slash all.
Very well at the top. Petitions less than 500 services which don't have a service in context of respective cabinet portfolio. Yeah. So the ward council is only involved in related to the issues.
Right. Any other questions or comments, please? Tommy?
Just clarification procedurally, this, if we agree to this now, this is presumably goes forward as a recommendation to full council as it's a change to the constitution. So, okay.
I can help you there quickly. Two things. It's not change the constitution because it's a protocol.
Okay.
The protocol can be changed by council members, and if members are happy of a recommendation, in consultation with the 3 group leaders, I could put forward and have them agree minor changes that don't change the sense of the constitution. So if you really want, you could make this a recommendation to council if you felt like it, and that's not a problem. But I could also ask the 3 group leaders, if standing committee is happy, would they agree for me to make a minor adjustment? Because in effect what Council Paulson's doing is not changing the petition scheme, just allowing the
way to get into it. So it's not actually go to the heart of any change for any document. So it's a matter that if members are happy to leave it with me, I'll see what the group is sign off and since one sitting in the room with us. Perhaps they might carry that message to the other two group leaders as well. But they don't have to give it, you can put up to council on its own right. It just means it happens straight away, which I think might take councils to it.
Okay, if I can just then come on to my next point, which that leads on to. We talked about various solutions, third-party solutions, in-house solutions, etc. I don't know what it will be, but my thought is inevitably there is going to be a cost associated with this, for which we haven't budgeted. So just how does that, or is it insignificant? I don't know how much it would be.
I think I was being careful in my words with Councillor Forster's proposal, is that until such time that the council puts its own scheme in place, no guarantee for it, that we open up to examples of two examples he's quoted, which are change to our board and 36 degrees, and that if we take those, there's unlikely to be a cost implication for us. Certainly we bring our own system in, but that's a part of a bigger package of which the petitions scheme is part of the package and free is part of that package as a bolt onto it. So in that sort of sense, I wouldn't anticipate a cost to council that would be material or a resource implication to council, because once it arrives and endorses it, it arrives as a complete petition.
Thank you. Will we need a proposal for it to take it forward?
Propose it then.
Take it forward?
Proposal we move forward to accept electronic submissions.
If you're voting that, that's fine. What I would do for all of you is probably just bang a copy of this updated proposal round to you informally for any feedback, make sure I've got the wording reasonably okay without everyone getting too stuck into the detail of it. But it will be a bit generic along the lines that I've just described to get ourselves on the way. But it's more about accepting electronic petitions rather than saying change.org. We'll do that on the website as well, because it's easy to change and you can change the protocol. So it'll open up the door. That makes any sense for members. So that if I would ask you just to literally to vote on purely that you agree the change to allow, or recommend the change to allow electronic petitions to be submitted.
Happy with that?
Yes.
Good. Will you need a second? A second?
Yeah. Second.
Decision making recommending.
And then go to council accept electronic submission.
This is a petition, okay?
This is a petition, that's right.
Any, so we have a proposal and a second. Are there any objections? That's the easiest way to do it, I think. No objections, then the motion is carried. Or the proposal.
Can I just ask the Chairman, how many residents raised the petition that you've raised this evening? Was it more than 500?
Chairman, it wasn't a response to a petition, it was a response to multiple requests from about 350 residents.
You could say it was a significant number of residents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we now revert to item 6, update complaints against councillors. Carol, I think you would like to just brief us on that if you will, please.
So one of the features of the update about complaints about councils has always been that Hart and the district as a whole, including the parishes, has a very low complaint level. We could say that's unique, but it could be just that members are much more mindful of their whereabouts and what they do. And that's reflected in the fact that you've only got 4 serious complaints that are referred to here. And I really use the word serious because those are the ones that got as far as getting through the test, which Peter Moore and I scrupulously go through to make sure they're acceptable. So we've got 4 issues here. We haven't found any breach of the code of conduct because of Councillor Neighbours here, so obviously he was subject to a complaint, but it was made by a third party and related to the matter which is one of the concerns which we brought the other paper to you, because we get a number of third parties, not necessarily using the complaint process, well, they are using the complaint, but won't formally follow it. This is one that did follow it, and the person involved had no link to the complaint. They saw it on TV, effectively, and off they went. So it's, quite rightly so, we shouldn't be dealing with third parties unless there's something really serious coming out of it, someone who's not affected. And that was one of the issues that were raised here. Oakham Parish Council was a very, very long complaint. The complaint came in from its former clerk. We published the details, so it's not protected information. And it was against a large number of councillors of the new council. When we went through it, there was a mixture of employment issues, stroke, code of conduct issues. We did find one area where there was a concern that it hadn't actually caused any sort of harm, and that was about a declaration of interest on an item which should have been recorded. The declaration was actually made, but they didn't record it, and therefore the complaint follows was, if it's not recorded, then it didn't happen, or if there's no record of the defence. But after quite a lot of work, we concluded there actually was no breach of the code of conduct. Both the parish council and the employee at the time who were involved accepted the result as being fair. We had a social media one. Again, this was brought by third parties. I have to make the point, which will come through in a later paper, is not the monitoring officer's role to be a policeman of what people say about politics and how they describe where they go. My role is to look at breach of the code of conduct, and you can't fit code of conduct complaints about people on free speech. You have to accept that you may disagree with where they go. And again, all four of these unfortunately Peter Moore was involved as well. So we found no complaint there. The last one was an interesting one about misuse of council. It was aimed at a group of members, and clearly you can't do a group of members for a breach of the code of conduct when they're acting as a political group. That's a different argument. And actually, when it came down, there wasn't a breach of the code of conduct. One, because the council had allowed the activity to take place, and B, the other political groups to do the same action as well. So you can't single them out. Again, the complainant in that instance accepted the findings being fair, because at least the issue had been looked at. So, of the four, I have to say I'm relieved there was nothing of great substance in there in terms of things that have gone across the district. Each one of them had a potential to trip somebody up in. So they did grant investigation and in terms of assessment. I think we spent quite a lot of time assessing them, although they started a trend, and there are others that haven't been reported because they didn't get vast complaints, which would have set the trend of third parties using social media to use complaints because they don't like what they're hearing. Is a bit of a trend that's something we didn't want to get caught by, because that's now logging the system now. But I have to congratulate members over the parish and district council members, because clearly you've only got 4 in the last year, and I think before that we only had 5 for about 3 years. We've done rather well, that members do actually adhere by the code, and though we rewrite the code a bit more to make it clearer, most members understand it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just raise a...
Yes.
Sorry, can I just raise a point? The information in this paper B, Appendix 1, it is in the public domain, is it?
It is in the public domain, and the letters that say we're not taking further action are published as well.
Oh, good, yeah. Because on Basingstoke, of course, we do have reports back from the monitoring officer from time to time, and we usually go into closed session because some of it is confidential, and I just wondered whether, that applied here, but I'm reassured by Darryl that there's nothing to worry about. Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear that the outcome of a complaint, some people publicise the complaint before it's even come in. We take a view that it should actually be treated confidentially while it's in the complaint. But the outcome of the complaint, we've always taken the view that, and we write in our complaint, when we fill in the complaint form, that we will publish the result, but not your personal details. So we always believe that councillors should know who's made the complaint about them. And Councillor Neighbour from many, many years ago had a bad experience with that in the old regime arrangements. But we've always taken the view that we are more open and transparent about complaints. The people who make complaints must take account of the fact that they're accountable for their actions as well. They can't just make a complaint and hide behind the barrier of why should I tell you who I am.
Chairman, I didn't declare this as an interest at the outset of this meeting because I don't believe one and it is. But just for absolute clarity, I was appointed as an grievance appeal panel for Odeon Parish Council, and that's still in progress. So it ties in with what you just said, but I don't believe it's an interest in any way.
You want us to record it?
Yes, please.
Are there any questions or clarifications or comments that you would like to make on this item? No? So the recommendation is that it be noted. Are we happy to note it? Good. Thank you. Item 7, the Road Lisbon Act, adjustments to the Code of Conduct arrangements for dealing with allegations. Will you lead us on this one, please?
So as we all agree, that the new regime for, when I say new, the 2011 Localism Act brought in a regime, standard regime, which sought a very, very light touch approach. It removed all the very strict arrangements and secrecy that revolved before the previous standards regime. It was brought in by the then coalition government, in particular Eric Pickles, who took a view that the standards regime had got out of control, and that his view was very much, if you don't like what a council is doing, then go and vote them off the council. And if you think they've done something wrong in terms of being corrupt, then tell the police. That was it. That's what the regime the government put back. And they changed the code of conduct that went with it to take away all the standardised approach and allowed localism to take over. And we followed that. But what the law requires us to do is, whilst we now don't determine how parish council complaints are received or dealt with, in terms of the outcomes, we cannot impose sanctions. Sanctions are more now naming and shaming, and that's it. Very few sanctions on it. Some would say it's good because it got quite prescriptive, but we have no other power other than really naming and shaming. And we have no power to enforce any decision by parish or town council. We can advise them only of our views. And members appreciate that meant all the strict arrangements before meant nothing, because it's disproportionate to the outcome that you could achieve. I know Councillor Dawn was very kind enough to give me a note yesterday. I mentioned the word quasi-judicial, which is the last phrase I would use for this process. It's more about members, there should be no point of law involved. What it is more about peer review of your conduct. That's what it's really about, in very simple terms. And sometimes that requires your own judgment and experience. Would you think that was fair? And that's the broad principle behind it. So we brought in the allegations as required by the Act. We have to have a process that works with both the parishes and the town, the district council. And I'm, under the Act, obliged to enforce it, putting it very simple. What we've been very keen to do is get rid of people using it as a tool for political purposes, but more about setting out a broad areas that we strip out what's not important and only deal what really, really is important. And that means moving complaints out of the standards regime in the sense of trying to strip it out so we can concentrate on what we should do. We've had those arrangements in place for a little while. Members were very good last year. You went through it line by line, and dare I say that David Argent rewrote parts of it for us very helpfully. I would say it was positive work. And we then also changed the complaint form accordingly as well to trim it down so it was much more flexible to where it goes. So that's worked well from last year. We've dealt with a number of issues, and you've seen the form that got to a certain stage where it works particularly well. And of course, the check and balance on any actions I do. The reason why the monitoring officer is given the power to do something is because this committee is outside the normal local government framework. It's a discretionary committee, and it's not politically balanced because it's got independent people on board like parish councillors. For that reason, it has no statutory role. It can't pass the law unless it's onto me. So that's why I've given the main driver to it. And although it gives me the power to make decisions, the reality of life is, A, I can't make decisions without having all consensus, to be perfectly frank. It wouldn't be long that I find my difficulty would be trying to change others by within your own committee. But more importantly, it also gives the check and balance on me, particularly Peter Moore, to come in as an independent, and Howard Lindsay, to actually do a check and balance on making sure that I'm not overstepping the mark. And if I weren't to follow them, I'm sure you'll hear about it pretty quickly. I have to say, we haven't fallen out at any stage ever. In fact, we've been quite constructive, both being moved by each other's point of view. And we do have different opinion. If we hadn't had it, we did. We would sort it out between ourselves, rather than pose one rule against the other. So that's part of why I sit here and do the role I have to. The changes in the arrangement have been useful, but unfortunately, as life moves on, people are trying to find ways of using the old stands regime as a quick and easy tool to smear somebody else. And I say that deliberately because that's what's happened on a number of occasions, where people have said they've used social media to make their complaint. It publicises it well in advance, and the poor council at the other end has been in fact maligned right from the word go, without any evidence or any testing of it. It's been all over the place. And then they expect us to then investigate it, particularly their third parties that don't like actions. And having spoken to both yourself and the two independent persons, we've suggested changes to try and reduce that impact of unjustified third-party complaint. If you've got a complaint, by all means make it, but you should be a party who's been affected by the action of the councillor, not someone who just thinks that's unfair or just don't like their action. And also it circumvents individual grievance procedures as well. If you've got do it this way round, and the councillors can't use this system as a proxy, not to be seen to be making a complaint, that's somebody else, and using someone else to do it. So we've tried to tighten it up, and I appreciate that it could be more simplistic from Councillor Dawn's point to give some useful comments to me of how you might adjust some of the wording to be a little bit more simple, to make sure what you're saying, which I think what you're really coming down to. Although he's asked questions about how do you prove it, but I think you've got to use your judgment, is what I'm really going to say on lots of it. So it's basically saying is, we won't take something from a third party who's not actually the person who's been affected by the complaint. That's one of the drivers on this one. We certainly don't want to take complaints where someone's already gone public with it and is using it as clearly as a publicity tool. That's the second big driver. If someone's been already prejudiced the investigation by how we go in, but we end up getting lots of, and we have had on one of the complaints, many people using social media to complain about the complaint they've just read, and the council and us didn't even know about the complaint having come in, let alone even had a chance to look at it. And when we did, it ended up one of the complaints on here that there's actually no basis for the complaint at all. So I think that's a reasonable approach to take. Certainly make it clear we're not looking at anonymous complaints either. Is that we do want people to actually stand up and be transparent who they are when they make complaints. So that's why we've done the changes that I've proposed on here. I accept the wording can be tightened up a bit more, and I was going to suggest that in the light of some of the comments made by Councillor Dawn, I might do some adjustments to the wording, which I'm happy to circulate to members, to say, if you're happy with the thrust of where we're going, can I do some adjustments to the wording and circulate it around to pick up any ad hoc comments and see whether or not we can tighten that up. But the whole driver to this is, the basic part works, we're now just trying to cut the stuff that doesn't need to come in front of us to stop this abuse. And the potential to abuse this in today's world is quite high, when it's easily accessible to people to get to the system in the first place. And somehow we've got to draw quite a harsh line, otherwise you can only resource yourself trying to deal with stuff, when the outcome is, all you can do is name the chain. And that's the only sanction. And is that worth a significant decision involving cross-examination at hearings, barristers being involved, that sort of scenario. So it's just trying to tighten up an arrangement that seems to work, broadly speaking, right, but cover up the issues raised by people who are being inventive in how they want to apply it.
Do we have any?
I accept we don't want to take anonymous calls, but suppose there's or frivolous one, but suppose there's a fairly serious one, would you offer any confidentiality in the initial stages to the person making the complaint?
The complaint form actually makes that very clear. In exceptional circumstances, depending on the case, we would do.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is really about independent persons. In section 3, on page 3 of 9. It says, before the monitoring officer considers a complaint, the monitoring officer will send the IP and then lists things that they will send. And I don't know whether this is covered by the Localism Act, but is there anything to imply or say that the independent person handles that with confidence? Or is that just, it's kind of presumed that they won't publish it themselves? I don't know. Is that covered anywhere else? Because they could just say, and here it is on Facebook.
I think we ought to.
I'm suggesting they would.
No, I think you're right, to be perfectly honest. I think we ought to make clear that, although it's mentioned in a slightly different context in the paper, I think the outside we expect all parties to maintain confidentiality. Interesting enough, under the Freedom of Information Act, for example, we don't have to release the IP's comments because they are protected. We expect them to be protected in their own right. So part of that's our working relationship rather than the protocol. But I think we're trying to pick that up more about the fair hearing as it goes, but we can make it much clearer.
Thank you. Any other point? Okay.
I haven't really thought this through, so maybe we could discuss it briefly. There's 3 or 4 references to the fact that if the monitoring officer thinks investigation to be prejudiced by premature publication, he can draw a line down and forget about it. But presumably the indication there is it's the complainant or the person being complained against or the being complained against who are trying to create a pitch. And that would be so easy to do. Anybody can simply go online and prejudice them. You don't then have to deal with it any longer, which is a real cop-out, isn't it?
I'm happy to reword that. Taking into account this, you probably are correct. You're right, it could be twisted back in reverse, couldn't it? I think we need to put some wording in that covers that off. The thrust being, you're right, if it's the third party, like the person making the complaint is prejudiced as a result. But what would you do if the councillor, let's put it that way, also went public with it? More, I would argue, well, they haven't prejudiced the complaint as such, but if they released the name of the person making the complaint, that would be another breach of the Code of Conduct straight away. So we'd look closely at that part. But most people are probably quite happy for it not to be public until such time it's investigated. But yeah, you're right, someone might do. Well, then what would be the sanction? Tell them what. Well, sorry, I mean, a bit flippant on that. I appreciate that. Sorry.
There's a theme running through all these papers. Darren doesn't want to do it.
I think, Chair, you're right. What I don't want to do is, we haven't got the resources to do it, is deal with the frivolous stuff. I really think that if you're going to deal with a complaint, you should go to the heart of someone who's caused some serious harm to somebody or misrepresented it. But what I'm trying to do is not get involved in the frivolous bit altogether. And you wouldn't want me spending my time doing frivolous stuff and not doing anything else, because the way it goes at the moment, it's on there. That's why we've got the check and balance on there in terms of having an IP. But if it does hit the issues that, like it's a secondary impact or something, I have to consult with the IP, who come back and say, don't be so silly, deal with it. So looking at A, section A, the initial action by the monitoring officer, A, monitoring in concert with independent person considers that list there, which is the first text. I have to consult with the independent persons to say whether I have to tell them what I think I'm doing. I have a practice now.
Can I just come in on that, Chair? On Appendix A, throughout this list, there seems to be a mixture of the monitoring officer consulting with the IP and the chairman, or the IP on his own. I just wonder whether there's a lack of consistency. This is a point I have already raised with Darren anyway. It may just be a drafting thing. But I think this local authority, may not be unique, but in terms of advising the monitoring officer, you have an IP and a chairman of the standards committee, whereas from my previous experience, on basis though, they retained the original independent laypersons, and there were 4 of us. The fact that one of us, myself as chairman, was neither in or there, we would still advise the monitoring officer. But here you use the chairman of the standards committee as well as the IP, which is tantamount to the same thing basically. But it's just a question of consistency throughout, where the monitoring officer is seeking advice. Does he seek it from both or one? The IP and the chairman, or just the IP? I don't know. I would have thought both.
We're talking about Appendix A, aren't we? Yeah. That would be the consistency you're looking at. And also, that means you've got the third party scrutiny. So it's not just the professional scrutiny from the IP point of view and the monitoring point of view, you then got the independent verdict on the critical scrutiny as well.
Thank you, Joe. Some of what's been said there echoes some of the points I did make down in my note. My apologies, I don't have it with me because when I looked on my phone, it doesn't show me the comments I've put in the document, which is very frustrating. But I think one of the things we do need to focus on within this is that the way we consider some of these things should be about the action of somebody who's done something wrong, not necessarily the process. Because people, they didn't understand the process and they complained on social media, and then someone said, oh, you can complain to the council. They've gone ahead and complained to the council. That in and of itself, to my mind, shouldn't be a reason to reject things just because they didn't understand the process. Clearly we will have people who will use that as part of an ongoing campaign, which is not what we would like. But I'm worried that by trying to protect against that, we disenfranchise those that just don't understand the process. And so I prefer some of this to be considered in that initial stage to say, you know, do the actions appear to have tried to prejudice or confuse it? But at the end of the day, whatever the originating action was that's being complained about, that still stands. Whatever anybody's done afterwards, it's that we should be looking at to try and understand, fix, solve, or whatever. So that was one of the thoughts that was coming out of me, and I completely understand what you're saying about trying to streamline this to keep it tight and fairly lightweight. The other bit that did sort of come across to me as a concern was on section 3, on page 3 of 9. The initial assessment, there's no right of appeal. And that always worries me a little bit. That the decision is absolute. Is that always the best way of dealing with it? Well, sorry.
I'm waiting to catch up.
No.
Right. The right of appeal has to be adapted somewhere. Someone's got to make it. What you can't do is go back to a committee because you'll carry on. Because otherwise you just literally say, what's the point of having a fighting master say, and you now can appeal to somebody else. So it has to be clear as it comes out, particularly where actions have been taken for the IP. It should be pretty clear. In terms of the other position is the ombudsman, local government ombudsman, can look at maladministration if they feel you haven't followed the process correctly. They can look at barking mad one. But of course you do have the right to a judicial review, which is the common answer to all of these parts, because there is a third party right which is independent of all of us. Right. So we could put that in as a bit at the end about the ombudsman, like we do when we have ombudsman complaint letters saying you've got to complain about the process followed. What the ombudsman won't look at is the actual merit of the decision.
Yes,
that's not just looking at good practice where it goes. Although if you make, I'm going to put it in simple terms, make a barking mad decision, including the ombudsman will intervene at that point. But that would be the third check and balance on it. But if you add another right to appeal on to another person, particularly if you can't go higher than me in terms of where we are because of the way it's set up, can't bring it back to the committee as such, because that means everything can come back to committee. Can I just appeal? How would you filter out the merit? So it's designed to be a stop for what is meant to be frivolous at that point where two people looked at it, and maybe now with the third person looking at it, that should be enough with the chairman speaking on top of it. But we could put the note in here, and if you complain right any further, in the decision letters, like we do with our complaint process in the council, we do mention the ombudsman, is that you can now go to the ombudsman if you feel there's been something wrong in the way we've gone about doing our business.
I'm always concerned, as I said a little earlier, about the person who doesn't understand our processes, because it's important if they do believe there is an issue that they have that right. Although, to some extent, you'd hope they'd go through their councillors, because that's what we're here for. You get a lot through that. I know Councillor was keen to speak as well, but just on a slightly similar vein to my earlier comment about the action rather than the process. In the no action stuff at Appendix A, there's a discussion about vexatious or politically motivated or persistent complainant, and I completely understand. I suggest I could just stop at vexatious, because the definition of vexatious can then go on to decide what's been made. But the persistent complainant and the repeat complainant at point E, again, my worry is that although we have somebody who complains regularly, occasionally they will complain about something that is valid and should be investigated, and there's a risk that we throw them out to say, you can't get 10 complaints this year, the 11th one that happens to be serious can't be considered. And that, I'm just trying to avoid that sort of situation.
Crying wolf situation, isn't it?
Well, indeed, you know, depending what the problem is, you can't prejudge that. It may be something serious. And I'd much rather that came through and it was looked at, and maybe you look at it because you have so much experience in these things and say, yes, it may be the 11th this year, but I can see there's an issue here, and therefore we'll take it forward.
Chairman, I think I agree. On certainly C, if you want to stop it at vexatious or something similar. What I would do is go back to what the Ombudsman uses as their own notes, because it's very similar wording. So I'll probably go back to what the local government Ombudsman used to put that wording in, if that's where it works. It's not quite like this, but it'd be something similar we could put in there to take it out. E is an interesting one because it's meant to be about the persistent complaint about somebody raising the same argument each time round, which we have had. And what we had a case where actually included by the council 7 years ago that there was no breach of control, and the new guy just turned up and started it all over again. Hence we tried to rule that out. That was an Odium case. And we've had, so if that was meant to be about raising the same complaint on the same issue, rather than I'll come back again that says, I've got my 5th complaint about my 5th councillor. That was never the intention. Each case is on its merits. This was trying to stop a repeat of the same argument on the same case.
Repeat is the word to use.
Yeah. So we'll adjust that wording to tighten that up as well to reflect that. But yes, we weren't trying to stop somebody making genuine complaints. And going back to your point about the social media one, I will look at that one again to try and pick some wording up. It may well that we rule it out because it says at the beginning, in consultation with the chairman, that we think it's being prejudiced. That was the check and balance we brought in. That was just not my decision in that part. Perhaps we make that clear in the section where it comes up as well. We might delete one, have the other. It's a good point.
One very quick one, practical one, on page 7 and 9. So we're going through the procedure for hearings, and about a third of the way down the page, or less than a quarter of the way down the page, the proceedings are over, you disappear, or everybody disappears so the panel can have a good think, and then people come back and the recommendations are announced orally. How many days might you stay there waiting for this oral announcement if it's a complicated issue?
Yeah, I think the panel's got to be given a chance, but the panel may say, we need to reflect on this and come back in a couple of days' time. I think if you're happy to put a date in, what would you suggest? I'm completely open to whatever members would think the panel should be able to do.
I think it's just a case of removing recommendations and putting in, I'm not quite sure what, but if you've got to announce the recommendations already, you've got to have concluded what they're going to be.
So what it should be, the panel should make its decision.
I think it's you, Darren.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I'm quite happy to pick something. Yeah, you're right. The panel was sitting and hang, but we had a hearing today where on another matter in a different context. But the panel deliberated for an hour and then announced its result. You know, you'd expect it almost to be that fast, unless the panel can't. So I think we need some wording about here it goes. But
Where practical.
yeah, should
The panel's recommendations may be announced as soon as possible.
yeah, we'll try and find some wording on that. And any help with that wording would be greatly received.
My suggestion would be that it's already that causes some of the problems that rather implies you'll go to an exiting the forum. And perhaps to communicate via email to the complainants where possible. Assuming they're happy now. Because you can send a fairly short summary and say, you know, the complaint's dismissed and the details, you know, sort of judgment or it will follow.
Is it needed at all? Do you have to announce anything already? Can't you just scrub that stage? People want it in writing anyway, won't they?
It's up to you. It's up to you. If you were at the, I suppose if you put it this way, right, if you were at the receiving end of this, what would you expect to happen? Would you want the silence of the panel, or would you be happy to wait for it to come out sometime later without the certainty? That's all I'm saying.
Sorry.
Yeah, speaking as a long-time member of this council, who upon occasion is complained about, very careful what I say. Actually, this regime we have in front of us is a lot better than the old regime. So the old regime, there would be hearings discussing your alleged behaviour, and you weren't entitled to know that the hearings were going on, because you weren't part of the process until a verdict was reached, in which case you were then called to appear, if there was something that's been made against you. So this process is better. I think what I would say is, if you are ever involved, I think you'd like to know where you stood as soon as it's practicable, and 10 working days, you know the date they've met, and if 8-9 days later they still haven't told you what's going on, you're going to get a little bit frustrated.
Presumably, Chairman, if it's a really difficult.
Your chairman.
Sorry. If it's a really difficult case, the panel could possibly have the power to adjourn for a set period of time. So that if they wanted to unmake the announcement, they could come back in 3 days or whatever.
How about something along the line, the panel will make its recommendations at the earliest opportunity as soon as possible. But a full report will be prepared within 5 working days.
Can I just say the panel's recommendations will be communicated as soon as possible, and then tell them, or you can email them, or
Whether they get to know it.
wherever.
Yeah, I think members wanted a target last time around. Yeah, I'd rather deadlines disappear like wind. We need some deadlines, obviously, if you're hanging on waiting. You need something that says people get in. 10 working days is a bit too fast to where it goes. The panel's recommendation which will as soon as they can. And we should put that emphasis on that one. Or otherwise give a date before we will do it.
I think you and I understood when under the old regime we had a number of hearings, and I think we had decisions almost immediately. Well, after reflection, I think we left the room. I think we left the complainant and the others here, and we went into a separate room. But I'm sure if my memory serves me correct, we did actually
We
decide on the
always
day.
managed within half an hour,
Yeah.
so to be able to come back.
Yeah. Having settled some disagreements like that.
And the same happens in licensing. Very quick. But the idea is that written summary given to the person.
That's a very good point, and I think Jill actually mentioned that in my listening back in the already. So can I go away and think of some wording? I think I get understand what you mean. Let's just get the wording right. Because I've got to circulate some of this to you. So if you're happy, let me just go away, knock up some more wording, and I'm open for any help that anybody has got. I'm not ready to my own wording. Please put your back in, but make sure it's workable. That's all I would say, so everyone can get there rather than get caught in the detail.
Just one other point. It's a bit later in the day. Peter was talking about the independent person and the chairman of the committee. I'm sure when I was chairman of the committee, you involved me. You were asking advice of the independent persons. I think you also nailed me as well.
That was just good practice on my
I know.
So the change suggested by the members here actually, to me, makes no big difference. So I'll have it in.
Notwithstanding what is actually written in the procedure.
But what members have said here, that actually formally including the IP and the chairman on all matters wouldn't really affect me too much because actually we do it already.
Yeah.
And Alison, you've had a few as well. So that's why it's an easy change because it makes common sense and we already do it.
We'll just tie it up the wording.
Can I just say on a frivolous note, there was confusion over which Peter said which.
Oh yes.
Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. So when Daryl's circulated this for our comments, it'll come back in some new improved form. What happens after that? Does it go Cabinet, full Council, ONS?
Full Council. This committee is a creature of full Council. There's nobody in between. So what I ask is, can we work on consensus? I think we did that last time when we did the adjustments to this on the complaint form. The members were very helpful. There were a couple of winners and losers, but I think members took the spirit correctly. We just got to work for them to go through. So you're happy for that arrangement to go through. And if you did make changes, I'll ask you to actually circulate everybody the same change so we actually see what you said, not allow me to filter it out. But I'd rather everybody saw that and then have a bit coming back in. But let me do a first stab in the next couple of days and we'll take it from there. These minutes won't arrive until probably now because the full council agenda for January's committee goes out tomorrow, so this is not going to make that until the agenda for tomorrow. So we're looking at February council, if that's okay, which gives us some time to get this wording right. I've rather got the wording right than just go on there. But for Councillor Forster's one, that's another reason why I was saying let's try and open up the petitions one. We're happy with that wording. We'll try and get that underway earlier rather than hang on and wait, because I don't think anyone's going to have difficulty with it if I can get the wording correct.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Oh.
Thank you. Completely different. Started at Appendix B. The hearing will be before a panel of 3 members, one of which must be a parish councillor. Now, how does this relate to agreements going on at the moment, where you ask for 3 members, one from each political party?
We have an issue which we discussed today where we have a duplication of this process, of the hangover from the old constitution and the old standards regime, where parishes and district councils sometimes have their own grievance procedures. And the Levery case was one that the Spaniard tells about, unless it's referred to in here, which is, we have picked it up. But we still have, in the district council, the arrangement that if an officer or a member wants to have a complaint about another member, then there is an informal grievance procedure you follow within the district council's constitution, which sets it in parallel or outside this regime. And of course, if you're dealing with it as an internal matter within the council, then clearly it's only a matter for internal council members to get involved. Hence, we have the 3 political parties represented. There is a debate that I'd like to have with others about whether or not we should still have that parallel grievance procedure, because this ought to be the procedure where you've got to complain about a councillor, and this is how it goes. If an officer has to complain about a councillor, perhaps this isn't the way to go. But then there's another issue that, and we have to be careful how we phrase this, mediation would have been a better scenario than the grievance procedure and this procedure. And we need to find a balance between the thrust of how that's picked up. I see both extremes at the moment, I'm not sure the council's internal grievance procedure is the right way to deal with any of the complaints at all. I'd rather that was struck out and we put out something more informal. But you could rely on this procedure, which is what I think Ledbury actually said, which is a court case, it was Ledbury, where it said you ought to follow the procedure set out. Although this picks it up, I just feel a bit uncomfortable having two such separate procedures. If you're going to be dealt as a councillor with a complaint, then perhaps the standards regime is the right way of dealing, because the outcome can only be the same. So why have a separate rule? That's a matter I'd like to bounce around between members before I formally, form my own view, which is probably we need to change. So with this one line, and through a councillor Bailey's point of view, if he looks at the way the meeting, how the hearing today was run, he'll find the same words are sitting in this document already. We had to bring these words into that panel, right? There wasn't enough guidance for the panel otherwise. So in other words, we're already trying to actually duplicate where what we can't do is come up with a different set of penalties. It can only be one and the same. Otherwise you disadvantage people.
Yes.
Any other comments, questions? Right. The recommendation is that well, we've got the suggestions. So it's now to circulate a revised document.
Yes, Chairman, we could say something along the lines that we did on the last meeting in March. The committee considered the updated, whatever it is, complaint procedure of the session of improvement and clarity which you have done. In the light of adjustments may be admonished to circulate the finalised version of the respective documents prior to publication. And then it will be a form recommendation to council.
So,
if that's okay.
A proposal for that, please?
Yeah.
David? And Peter? Any objections? No? Good. Now I ask you a question. What happened to making the agenda?
Jill has some difficulty in counting at the moment. I'm sure she gets when she gets out of the office and buys everyone a cake and a beer, it'd be quite useful. Actually, there wasn't an agenda item. There never was. I'm sorry about that. Let's welcome again.
Right. Are you happy that we close the meeting then?
Yeah, good job.
14 minutes, I'll take it.
Thank you. Yeah, good job.